Hello, and thanks for stopping by. I don't know about you, but whenever I'm in a rush to catch a train, the last thing on my mind is pausing somewhere to watch a film. For several decades during the 20th century though, this was something that was actively encouraged at two of London's mainline railway terminals, Victoria and Waterloo, both of which were furnished with their very own cinemas. These picture houses were established in the 1930s by British News Theatres Limited, who, as the name suggests, specialised in screening newsreels. It's easy today to forget just how important this medium once was, but for much of the first half of the 20th century, newsreels were big business, and they played an important role in keeping the public up to date with current affairs. Victoria was the first station to receive its news theatre, which opened its doors in September 1933. As you can see from this image, the cinema was blessed with a very grand entrance indeed. The lobby was located on the western side of the station, adjacent to Buckingham Palace Road, and close to present-day Platform 19. The auditorium, meanwhile, which could accommodate 240 people, was built into the station's roof. Up in the darkness of the cinema, the audience were able to keep an eye on the arrival and departure times of trains thanks to a small illuminated display which was positioned beside the main screen. A clock was also on show, which, in a canny move, was always kept running 5 minutes fast. In an interview prior to the cinema's opening, the director of British News Theatres, Norman Holbert, claimed the Victoria cinema was designed to be automated. In other words, few staff would be employed, and patrons would gain entry by inserting coins into a turnstile. However, it's not clear whether or not this system was implemented, or if it was, how long it remained in use, as according to a review of the cinema from October 1933, one journalist described the entrance as being staffed by uniformed attendants. That same article also offered the Victoria News Theatre high praise, stating that its soft neon lighting offered, quote, a bright oasis in a gloomy desert. Entrance to the cinema was sixpence, and the programme that's run on a loop throughout the day contained around an hour's worth of news, cartoons, travellogues and short informational films.
In this position it's quite easy for me to dislocate his elbow.
Victoria's new cinema and its counterpart at Waterloo, which we'll be seeing in a moment, were both designed by the architect Alistair MacDonald, who happened to be the son of the former Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald. In the 1920s, Alistair had spent time honing his craft in the United States, first in New York, where he studied skyscrapers, then Hollywood, where amongst the film lots, he picked up tips on lighting and sound insulation. The knowledge Alistair gained in America was clear to see in his station cinemas. As well as being gorgeously Art Deco, each building was praised for its compact nature, soft lighting, and excellent soundproofing, the latter of which was vital considering the noisy environment into which the two buildings were slotted.
And M24 for Camberley and Reading will leave from platform 21, falling at Whittam.
The only real downside, which to be fair was quite a major one, especially if you had a weak bladder, was that neither building had enough room to accommodate its own toilet facilities. As a quick but important aside, it deserves to be noted here that in the Second World War, Alistair MacDonald was one of the people who was part of, and had indeed helped establish, the St Paul's Watch, the dedicated team who, through incredible bravery and armed only with the most basic equipment, helped save St Paul's Cathedral from being destroyed by fire during the worst nights of the Blitz. So whilst his own contributions to London's architecture may have been swept away, Alistair certainly played his part in preserving one of the city's most beloved landmarks. Waterloo Station's new cinema opened just under a year after Victoria's on the 27th of August 1934. It was located on the eastern edge of the terminal, just in front of Platform 1 and alongside the Cab Road. Waterloo itself was no stranger to cinema, It had been shown off in an early Pathé newsreel in 1922, when the current building, which had undergone a major revamp, was officially unveiled by Queen Mary. The grand facade of the Waterloo News Theatre was elevated and accessed via a staircase which was located beside the gates at platform 1. As it also screened the latest cartoons, the stairs and entrance to the cinema were often flanked by cardboard cutouts of Walt Disney characters during the 1930s and 40s, a feature which is depicted in this painting by Helen McKee, which dates from 1942. Waterloo Cinema was slightly bigger than the one at Victoria. Its auditorium, which could hold 250 people, was contained in a large box-like structure which loomed over Cab Road. An emergency staircase led down from the eastern end of this building, which can be seen both in this photo and in the background of this image showing troops and evacuees at Waterloo in 1940. If you examine this spot today, it would appear that you can still see a faint echo of these old steps. At first, the Waterloo New Cinema was open between 11:30 AM and 11 PM on Mondays to Saturdays, and 5 PM to 11 PM on Sundays. To help deal with its compact nature, the Waterloo Cinema employed a new technology known as the Innes projection system, which, using a special arrangement of mirrors, allowed viewers to sit just 3 feet away from the screen without experiencing eye strain or a sense of nearness. As with Victoria, a clock was also on display, along with a small screen for showing train times. Waterloo Cinema was also very well received, being highly praised for both its architecture and exterior lighting, which was described in the Tatler magazine as being composed of precious greens. British News Theatres Limited, who would later go on to become Capital and Provincial News Theatres, initially had grand plans and hoped to build other new cinemas at King's Cross, Euston and Liverpool Street. Sadly, these never came to fruition, although in August 1934, the same month Waterloo's new cinema was unveiled, they did open a non-railway branch at the southern end of Shaftesbury Avenue, close to Piccadilly Circus. This was dubbed the Eros News Theatre, and like its station counterparts, was designed to squeeze into a tight space. In this case, the auditorium was below ground. Years later, the Eros became a very seedy place indeed, as its business model switched to showing movies of a far bluer nature. In this guise, the exterior of the Eros can be seen towards the end of the classic 1981 film, An American Werewolf in London. It's inside the cinema that the unfortunate backpacker, David Kessler, undergoes his second transformation into a werewolf before going on to wreak havoc across Piccadilly Circus. As television began to gain traction in homes throughout the 1950s and 60s, interest in cinema newsreels began to wane, and as such both of London's station cinemas underwent a rebrand. The Victoria News Theatre became a cartoon cinema, specialising in programmes aimed at younger viewers, whilst Waterloo began screening vintage films, and thus became known as the Waterloo Station Classic. Sadly, both cinemas became increasingly grubby affairs. The Waterloo Station Classic closed on the 14th of March 1970, the last showing being an Alfred Hitchcock double bill. The cinema then lay derelict before being demolished in 1988. The Victoria Station Cartoon Cinema soldiered on a little longer, but closed its doors in 1981, with its final screening being the Disney film The Hound That Thought He Was a Raccoon. Both buildings are now long vanished, which I think is such a shame. This is the site of the old Waterloo Cinema. When you consider how popular specialist boutique cinemas have become in recent years, I think it's fair to say that the old station news theatres at Victoria and Waterloo may have been granted a new lease of life had the buildings managed to survive a little longer. Having said that, one of the railway arches that lurks deep beneath Waterloo, which if you're familiar with this channel will know is an area I've covered here before, is now home to the Vault Theatre. Although it's more of an arts and performance space, it could be argued that this trendy venue is the spiritual successor to Waterloo's old cinema. If you fancy checking it out, you'll find the Vault Theatre tucked away off of the famous Leek Street graffiti tunnel. Waterloo Cinema in particular was briefly caught on film several times during its existence. There's the 1944 film, London Terminus, several clips of which we've already seen in this video, along with the similarly named masterpiece, Terminus, from 1961. In Terminus, you can spot the cinema just before what is perhaps the documentary's most famous scene, the one in which young Matthew Perry is set up to believe he's lost his mum. Probably something you wouldn't get away with today. The cinema can also be briefly glimpsed in 1973's Horror Hospital, by which point it had already closed for good. Thanks so much for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts regarding these two lost London cinemas. Were you lucky enough to experience them when they were open? And do you think we should lament their passing? Please let me know in the comments. I've received a lot of kind comments on this channel lately and would like to thank all of you who've left them and subscribed. Your support really does help keep the videos coming. If you're not a subscriber yet, it'd be great to have you along, so please do consider clicking the button to sign up. This will ensure you don't miss out on any future content, as well as helping the channel to grow. And if you'd like more London-based history in the meantime, please be sure to head on over to my website, robslondon.com. I have an Etsy store too, Rob's Online Designs, where you'll find mugs featuring hand-drawn designs of taxis, buses, tube trains and so on. Links are all in the description. For now, thanks again friends, stay well and please be sure to stay tuned.